Hello Year 4, and today is Wednesday the 3rd of February, and this is our next instalment of Fintan the Fedora, the world's worst explorer. Okay, so again we're just going to add to our reading journal. I'm going to read the next few chapters. So a quick recap: Fintan and Gribbly managed to find Corentina, who knows all about the Choco Plum, and she has agreed that she's going to take them and show them where they can find it. Whilst this is going on, Buckmeister and Max Wrench, they have got a secret agent, Gonzales, on the tail of Fintan Fedora. They're following him because they are also in search of the Choco Plum, and they think that Fintan is some kind of incredible mastermind, but it's just that they appear to be falling victim to his clumsiness and accidents that seem to happen around Fintan. So the Gonzales just managed to get his disguise burnt, didn't he? He was in the cafe trying to listen in on their conversation with Corentina, and Fintan he moved the candle, and that then set fire to Gonzales. And also you've got the Bumsteads trying to trail him, and they just happened to see Fintan from the cafe that they were in, so they decided to pinch a vehicle, didn't they, to follow him. So let's see if any of them are successful, or what else could possibly happen, go wrong. Chapter 15. Right, I'll just click onto the chart, sorry. So chapter 15. Good grief, Gribbly, this country is enormous, said Fintan as he stared out of the bus window at the seemingly endless hills and forests streaming past them. I thought England was big until I came here. This must be twice as big at least. I believe Brazil to be around 35 times larger than the United Kingdom, sir, Gribbly said in his usual matter-of-fact tone. The 7th largest land area in the world, in fact covering in the region of 8,456,510 square kilometres. Fintan whistled, apparently impressed. Really amazing. How do you know all this stuff, Gribbly? I read it in books, sir. Books, eh? Clever, nodded Fintan thoughtfully, and returned his attention to the scenery. Not far behind the bus, Eric and Edith Bumstead were rattling along at top speed in their stolen hot dog van. As they narrowly missed out on their free lunch, they were now hungrier than ever and had decided that Edith should drive while Eric scoured the cupboards in the back for food. Unfortunately, everything that hadn't already fallen out of the flap was uncooked or unrecognisable. Eric had never seen a tortilla before in his life. He assumed they were some sort of cardboard packaging and threw them out onto the road as well. What have we got then? Shouted Edith, hunched over the steering wheel, concentrating on avoiding the huge potholes in the road. Sausages by the look of it, replied Eric, and some sort of spicy red stuff. Don't know what it is, but it smells funny. Cooking sausages in a moving vehicle is not a particularly easy or sensible thing to attempt, even on the smoothest of roads, but Eric was determined to give it a go. However, just standing up was proving difficult as the van lurched and dipped without warning, throwing him against the gas cooker and into piles of saucepans. His mother's little stomach problem hadn't got any better either, and was making him a bit dubious about striking a match to light the gas. Are you supposed to fry these things or boil them? He shouted, never having done either before. Edith risked a quick glance over her shoulder at the nasty pink thing her son was dangling from his dirty fingers. How should I know? She shrugged. What does it say on the packet? Wait a minute, said Eric, fumbling with a large plastic bag. Oh, that's no help at all. It's all written in foreign, isn't it? I'll just have to guess. You're useless, you are. Get up here and drive. I'll do the food, shouted Edith, but Eric was determined to manage on his own, ignoring his mother's continual criticisms, an occasional waft of foul-smelling air. He selected a big iron pot, threw a handful of the hot dog sausages into it and lit the cooker. A slightly worrying burning smell and a lot of smoke filled the back of the van. Edith's opinion of her son's domestic skills wasn't very high, and suddenly got even lower. "What on earth are you cooking them in?" she hollered. "What do you mean, what am I cooking them in?" bellowed Eric defensively. "A saucepan, of course. What do you think I'm cooking them in? A bath?" "No, you idiot. I mean, you're using cooking oil or water." Not being a particularly experienced chef, it hadn't occurred to Eric to use either. "Oh, right," he said, and began a frantic search through the cupboards again. "We haven't got any. Must have all fallen out when we borrowed the van. But there's a big bottle of vinegar." Hurriedly, he sloshed about a pint of it into the pan full of smouldering sausages, and then another pint or so onto his trousers and the floor of the van as they lurched sharply around the bend. There was a loud hissing and spitting noise, and even more smoke. "Get up here and drive and let me do it," repeated Edith, terrified they were about to go up in flames. "Look, just shut up, will you?" shouted her vinegar-soaked son, who was now rubbing his stinging eyes amid a cloud of black smoke. "It's all under control." A few eye-watering minutes later, Eric clambered back into the passenger seat with 2 platefuls of mushy sausages, which he'd cleverly prepared to be partly burnt to a crisp and partly raw. The boiled vinegar marinade certainly added a bit of flavour, as did the unidentified spicy red sauce he'd sloshed all over them, though it was the sort of flavour that meant they were soon both gasping for a drink of water and felt horribly sick. Meanwhile, aboard the bus, Finton was attempting to interest Gribley in yet another game of I Spy with little success. Apart from B for bus and T for trees, there hadn't been a lot of variation. Finton looked around his fellow passengers for inspiration and noticed a strangely familiar face. There was a man sitting right at the back wearing partially melted dark glasses and reading a newspaper. He looked uncannily like the man he'd set alight in Café Goutte de Russa. The only apparent difference was that this man had a big bushy ginger beard instead of a black one, which if anything looked even less convincing. For a moment he considered doing B for beard, which would definitely have foxed Gribley, but thought better of it. "Hey, look, Gribbs, look," he whispered, nudging his seatmate in the ribs with an unnecessary force. "It's that bloke again." "You mustn't point at people like that, sir. It's considered quite rude." Finton stopped pointing and gestured by nodding his head instead. "Look, it's the man from the cafe, but he's got a new beard this time." Gribley glanced up briefly. It was definitely the same man, and definitely quite a coincidence that they should bump into him again. For a moment, Gribley wondered whether the man had followed them, angry about the beard-burning incident, but soon dismissed the idea as silly. After all, there was nothing unusual about encountering a Brazilian man on a Brazilian bus, was there? Especially in Brazil. "I'm going to say hello," said Finton, despite Gribley's protestations that he should leave the poor man alone. Finton unsteadily made his way to the back of the lurching bus. The bearded man, having evidently spotted approaching trouble, buried himself in the newspaper. "Hello, remember me?" said Finton chirpily. "From the caff. Sorry about the newspaper and the beard and all that. It was an accident, you see. Honest, it was. Hope that wasn't your best beard, by the way. It was a lot nicer than this one, wasn't it? I'll pay for the damage if you like." The man tried staring out of the window in an attempt to ignore Finton's incessant wittering. It was then that Finton noticed the fancy-looking walkie-talkie on the vacant seat next to him. "Wow, I like your walkie-talkie thing. Can I have a look?" he said, snatching it up anyway. "I used to have a pair of these when I was little. Well, I did till my mum confiscated them, just because I tuned them to the police frequency and caused a few emergencies, and a national manhunt or two. Anyway, this one's great, really heavy, got loads of knobs, hasn't it? Looks like an army one or something." No, please don't touch," said the man, attempting to retrieve his property before something unfortunate happened to it, like fire, for instance. Finton stood swaying in the aisle, saluted and put a silly military-type voice. "Hello, Colonel," he said into the walkie-talkie. "Yes, this is General Fedora speaking, sir. My tank squadron is at the ready. Over and out." "Look, there he is, standing right at the back of the bus," screeched Edith, through a mouthful of half-chewed raw sausage. She pointed wildly. "Blimey, you were right. Do you think he's seen us?" Eric grabbed his mother's hand and pulled it down. Well, he probably has now, you stupid old woman, pointing at him. What's that he's holding, she added, peering instantly. It's not a gun, is it? Eric, who wouldn't have been at all surprised to find young Master Fedora was armed to the teeth, tried to focus on the strange dark object he was waving about. Nah, it's not a gun. If anything, it looks more like a bomb to me. A bomb? Screeched his horrified mother. Where would he get a bomb from? The road to Corentina's granddaughter's village was long, rough, hilly, and gradually increased in altitude. It was also extremely bumpy. At that exact moment, the bus hit a particularly big bump, causing Finton to fall backwards between the seats and launch the walkie-talkie out through the back window. Transfixed with sudden horror, the Bumsteads watched the dark object hurtle towards them and smash right through their windscreen. With the unexploded bomb lodged between them in Edith's plate of poorly cooked sausages, they screamed in terror, opened their doors and leapt out onto the road. Now, of course, the bomb was the walkie-talkie, wasn't it? The driverless old hot dog van wobbled wildly about, then suddenly veered off to the left and plunged into the thick greenery, where it disappeared into a gully. Eric and Edith lay on the road with their hands over their heads, waiting for the explosion, which, when it came, wasn't quite as enormous as they'd thought it would be, but enough to shake the jungle and frighten a lot of birds into the air. The fact that it was caused by the gas bottle under the stove, which Eric had forgotten to turn off, didn't occur to them. This had been attempted murder. How can these unfortunate events just get even more and more crazy each time? All right, chapter 16. What's going to happen now? Somewhere above the vast rainforest canopy, Max Wrench was seated comfortably in his executive helicopter. A red light began blinking on his satellite phone. This meant it was an important call. The red channel was reserved for secret communications in Operation Harvest, which was the name Randall had just invented for his company's vital Choco Plum grabbing mission. Wrench here, go ahead, he said importantly over the noise of the helicopter's engine. It was more bad news from Mission HQ, otherwise known as Randall's office. Apparently, the tracking device Gonzalez had cunningly implanted in his walkie-talkie had just gone dead, and all communication with him had been lost. Worse still, there were reports of an explosion in the vicinity just as the device had gone offline. It appeared that Agent Gonzalez had been eliminated. The only good news was that before his tragic death, Gonzalez had somehow managed to plant a second tracking device in the boy's rucksack, which meant they could now monitor his position from a safe distance. Wrench bit his lip in frustration. This kid had some nerve. He'd really stepped over the line this time. Give me the coordinates, he barked. I'm going to follow him myself, I am. A few hours later, Finton had just finished apologising to the driver for the broken window and resumed apologising to the ginger-bearded man for losing his walkie-talkie when the bus finally came to a halt. They had pulled up outside the village where Corentina's granddaughter Anna was supposed to be waiting for them. Several of the passengers, including the sulking bearded man, piled off after them into the rapidly darkening evening and collected their bags from the hold. A grumpy-looking teenage girl with long black hair came to meet them. You, Fedora? She asked bluntly. It wasn't a particularly warm welcome, but considering they were complete strangers who were only there to get their hands on the family's treasured secret, it was remarkably polite. Finton and Gribbly grabbed their assorted luggage and followed her down a red earth path between a mass of dark trees. They arrived at the village just as the sun was setting over the jungle, and the night's insect population was beginning their almighty chorus. There weren't many buildings in the village at all. So far as they could see, just a handful of wooden shacks with corrugated iron roofs and very basic facilities. There were a few bushes and banana trees, but otherwise the village stood in an empty clearing of hard, bare earth marked out with collapsing fences. Tonight you stay with my family, said Anna, leading them into a small concrete walled construction. We eat, we sleep. Tomorrow I take you to river. OK, thanks a lot then, said Finton, who, despite the obvious hospitality he was being shown, didn't feel like he was all that welcome. He turned to Gribbly, raised his eyebrows and made a sort of, oh dear, What have we let ourselves in for, Face? Anna's parents were sitting in the corner stirring something in a metal pot. They gestured for their guest to join them. Finton looked around for a chair, but as there didn't seem to be one, sat cross-legged on the floor instead. Finton, he said, pointing at himself, then added, Gribbly, and pointed to him too. Their hosts nodded, but apparently didn't speak any English at all. Bowls of something dark brown and steaming were handed around, which Finton peered at with obvious distaste. However, it had stringy lumps and something that looked like kidney beans. Yum, he said, and attempted to look delighted. Anna pointed at the food. Fejadada, she explained. Meat stew. Everyone seemed to be waiting for their guests to start eating first, so Gribbly took a small, polite spoonful and appeared to enjoy it. Unfortunately, when it came to his food, Finton was rather less adventurous. I don't suppose you've got any peanut butter, have you? He asked hopefully, and was immediately poked hard in the ribs by Gribbly. Eat the meal, sir, he hissed. It's very impolite not to, and these people have cooked it especially for us. As it turned out, the food wasn't bad at all, and neither were the woven mats they were offered to sleep on afterwards. With the addition of a comfy sleeping bag and an inflatable pillow, Finton happily settled down for a good night's sleep. In fact, compared to the catering and accommodation currently being enjoyed by the unfortunate Gonzales, they were living in genuine luxury. Outside in the dark, the poor man sat beneath a tree, peeled off his itchy ginger beard and ate a few broken biscuits he'd brought along. With nothing else to do, he curled up under his coat and tried to get comfortable. The ground was hard, lumpy and a bit damp, and the air was full of little biting insects. Even more irritating, though, were the half a dozen or so scrawny village dogs that wouldn't leave him alone, and periodically came and peed on his hand. By the time dawn broke, he was feeling considerably less bright and breezy than the inhabitants of the nearby little concrete building. He smelled a lot worse too. Morning, Gribbs, said Finton cheerily. Today's the day we hit the jungle. Exciting, eh? Gribbly opened his eyes and steeled himself for another day of danger and discomfort. The whole household was up quickly, and they quietly set about preparing a kind of thick, stodgy porridge to see them on their way. Finton, who was finally learning some manners, ate without complaint and thanked the family for the kindness. Within half an hour, they were ready to go and emerged from the hut weighed down with their gear. Anna looked critically at the two improbable-looking explorers, who were already staggering beneath their huge rucksacks, hip bags, bum bags and bedrolls, as well as sundry pots and containers tied on with string. Why you bring so much stuff? She said. Too heavy for Forest, you mad boy. No, I'm not, insisted Finton. This is all very important explorer's equipment. I haven't packed anything I don't need. Anna didn't look convinced. Why you need these? She asked disapprovingly, gesturing towards his collection of plastic boxes. They're dual function, said Finton, thinking it sounded highly technical. They've got sandwiches in, and then when they're empty, they'll be perfect for keeping the fruit samples in. And anyway, they're really light. Why you bring big iron cooking pot then? Very heavy. Finton tutted, as this was completely obvious. Because it's another dual function item, of course. Young Adventurer magazine says that iron pots with lids are good for keeping things safe in, and for cooking in too. He decided not to mention the fact that it was also currently stuffed full of peanut butter sandwiches. Too much stuff, too heavy for Forest, repeated Anna, apparently unswayed by Finton's explanations. He frowned, rapidly beginning to dislike his young guide. She reminded him a bit too much of his older sister, who thought she knew best, didn't give him any credit at all, and was constantly finding something to criticise. He hadn't come halfway across the world to put up with the same nonsense he could get at home. So it was with some relief that he realised Anna didn't intend to accompany them for the whole journey. After a fairly gruelling 2-hour hike along some tricky forest paths, they came to a halt at a fast-flowing brown river. I stop here, announced Anna, and promptly sat down on the ground. Gribbly and Finton took off their heavy packs and greatly slumped down after her. A quick glance convinced Finton that there was no choco plum trees in the vicinity, which meant they weren't actually there yet. Now what? He said. Anna produced a crumpled sheet of paper from a small bag on which she'd written directions and drawn a rough map. Before handing it over, She hesitated and fixed both of her guests with a serious gaze. "You make promise to my grandmother not to harm trees," she said earnestly. "Now you promise me, too. You promise me you never tell where you found them and you never return. Okay? One day my grandchildren want fruits too." Finton and Gribley, conscious of her very serious expression and tone of voice, nodded their heads solemnly. "We promise," they said. "Cross my heart and hope to—" began Finton before realising it probably wasn't appropriate. Anna handed Gribley the map, as he appeared to be more trustworthy of the two, then got up and began uncovering a shallow boat which had been concealed with branches. "You bring back boat too," she added, with another stern gaze. Lurking behind a nearby cluster of trees which hung heavy with moss and ancient vines, Gonzales was watching all this with great interest, despite the fact that his only means of communicating with HQ had been destroyed. He had been instructed to follow the boy, and that was exactly what he was going to continue to do. What's more, he was going to do it extremely warily from a safe distance, and was determined not to be fooled by Fedora's idiot boy act again. He looked through his binoculars and confirmed that the girl had indeed given them a map, presumably to the valley where they'd find the fruit grove. This was excellent. He swatted away the irritating cloud of little flies which billowed around his head, attracted by the smell of dogweed, and made a mental note to wash himself in the river at the earliest opportunity. Chapter 17. Somewhere near the top of a massive New York office building, an entire floor was buzzing with excitement and activity. It wasn't often that Randall T. Buckmeister called an urgent meeting of all his top executives, advertising and marketing people. But that was exactly what he had just done, and at very short notice too. Obviously something important was happening. Hordes of smartly suited young business people with briefcases crowded out of the lift and converged on Giganti Foods International's impressively huge boardroom. Randall himself was already seated at the head of a massive polished oak table, sifting through a stack of papers. The executive took their seats, switched their mobiles to silent, and opened their laptops. Whatever this was, it was obviously big. Eventually, the great Mr. Buckmeister stopped arranging his notes and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," he announced, "this is big." Assorted little murmurings of "I told you it was big" ran excitedly around the table. "We at Giganti Foods International pride ourselves on being the biggest and the best in the world, and I've called you here today to tell you that, believe it or not, we're about to get even bigger. We are about to become the sole possessors of the world's rarest and most delicious fruit." He paused for dramatic effect. "The legendary charcoal plum." Another little wave of muttering rippled through the assembled employees, ringing from gasps of awe to mumbled disbelief. Their bosses had gone insane. "This fruit is so exotic that the most people think it's just a myth. But we at Giganti Foods aren't easily discouraged, not even by things that don't exist. We are visionaries. We are prepared to look beyond that myth and make it a reality. At this very moment, deep in the Brazilian rainforest, I have a crack team on the verge of possessing our prize. I have mobilized our vast resources to ensure that the mission is a complete success. And believe me, this is no minor operation. We have flown in the world's most sophisticated computer tracking equipment. We have forest clearing machinery to make a landing pad. And we have armed men to protect our property in case any of our competitors try to steal it from us. Furthermore, we have a fleet of the world's most advanced cargo helicopters ready to refrigerate the entire crop of these fruits and transport them back to our processing plants. Amid yet more gasps and mumbling, one senior executive felt moved to ask a question and raised his hands. Excuse me, Mr. Buckmeister, sir," he said with understandable hesitation, "but did you just say we're taking the entire crop? Is that really necessary?" Randall lowered his glasses and stared hard at the poor unfortunate questioner. "What's your name, son?" he asked. Binkmeister, sir." "Well, Binkmayer," he continued coldly, "in answer to your question, of course it's necessary, you idiot. These fruits only grow in one place in the entire world. If we leave any trees behind, what's going to happen? Someone else is going to take them. That's what, meaning we won't be the only company marketing them. Understand?" Thoroughly chastised, Binkmayer hung his head in shame, convinced he'd ruined any chance of promotion. This is serious business. We are not playing around here. These rare delicacies are going to be ours and ours alone. We will leave nothing behind. Nothing. Not even a single tree stump, branch or seed. The boardroom fell completely silent. They were a group of highly experienced, hardened executives, familiar with the cutthroat nature of big business practice. But this was extraordinary stuff. It was greedy, selfish, unethical, and probably highly illegal too. But no one dared to say a word. Randall checked his notes and began his conclusion. Pretty soon, I'm going to be speaking to the press. First up, a teaser campaign. We will tell them something big's coming, but we won't tell them what. We start a buzz. We then get them speculating. We maximize the publicity. Now then, I want you all people to get onto this campaign. Top priority, and I want it to be massive. So get to work. Give it all you've got, and I promise you all one thing right now. This is going to make us, an absolute fortune. Well, there we go then. It's all getting very tense at the minute. All right, so I shall see you next time, if I can stop. Okay, bye for now, Year 4.